to my Republican colleagues, can we move forward without President Trump? The answer is no. I've always liked Liz Cheney, but she's made a determination that the Republican Party can't grow with President Trump. I've determined we can't grow without him.
So that's what Senator Lindsey Graham thinks about the fights, such as it is, over Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Basically, she's against Trump, and the Republican Party can't live without Trump. So Liz Cheney, chair of the House Republican Conference, has to go. For her part, Congresswoman Cheney is warning her colleagues, quote, "The GOP is at a turning point. History is watching us." She writes in the Washington Post, "The question before us is whether we will join Trump's crusade to delegitimize and undo the legal outcome of the 2020 election with all of the consequences that might have. For Republicans, the path forward is clear." That may be so. It may be the path for Republicans is clear. But between what Senator Graham has to say and what we're hearing from Congresswoman Cheney, it looks like the grand old party hasn't figured out their grand old message. Joining me now is Omarosa Manigault-Newman. She's a former White House senior advisor for Donald Trump and author of the book Unhinged, an insider's account of the Trump White House. Omarosa, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Zerlina.
What is it about your former boss, Donald Trump, that gets so many Republicans just to stand behind him and promote this information that they know is not true?
You know, as I detailed in Unhinged, Trump world is a cult. And so these folks are following after him, even after what happened on January the 6th, which is very concerning. But when you talk about Representative Cheney and what's happening with the leadership, I think that there is a bigger implication for the party. And the Republican Party has a problem with women. The reason they have a problem with women is because Donald Trump has a problem with women. And if he's the de facto leader of the Republican Party, they should be very concerned going into the midterms.
Why do you think the Republican Party has a problem with women? I mean, we're going to talk in a few minutes in another block about, on the policy side, some of the issues that women and feminists have with the Republican Party. But what, in your view, is the Republican Party's problem with women? Like, why do they seem to struggle maintaining women in leadership positions?
Well, they've been struggling for the last, administration simply because Donald Trump only utilized those key women, like the chairwoman of the Republican Party, the GOP, and some of the members in the leadership as window dressing. He did not rely on them to help shape the ideology of the party. And as a result, what you see is this ability to kind of move these pieces the way Donald Trump sees fit. He's trying to erase his legacy of having a very tenuous relationship with women, and it's not working.
In terms of the way in which the Republican Party and Donald Trump specifically utilizes people from marginalized groups, I mean, one of the questions that comes up a lot are they using black people and black staffers as tokens? Are they tokenizing these people from marginalized groups? Are they using Elise Stefanik basically as a token, a woman, so they can't get accused of being sexist?
Well, I wish I had more than the 2 minutes. It's allotted for this segment to go into the depth of the exploitation of the GOP of marginalized groups, but I don't. So since I only have just a short amount of time, I will tell you that the tone has been set by the top. And as long as the top continues to just utilize those folks as just opportunities to show, hey, look, we have women in leadership, and not really relying on them to shape their policies, issues around fair pay, equal pay, issues around education, issues particularly about what happens with women in the workplace, as long as they just go at it alone with just the male leadership setting the tone and not relying on the women. This is the environment you get. This is who they are.
And yesterday, one of the women who is still in the Republican Party, Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito, she stood up for Liz Cheney and expressed her concerns about what could happen to the Republican Party. So let's take a listen. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of Liz Cheney. I think she's been bold and truthful into her truth. And so I applaud her for that. I think that we need to make sure as we're moving into 2022 that we don't start narrowing the tent, which is what I think this will do. And that concerns me greatly.
What do you think happens to the Republican Party after they demote Liz Cheney, a powerful woman in their conference? Does it mean the party no longer welcomes people who don't believe that the election was stolen?
Well, I think that the party is still trying to figure out who and how they're going to proceed. But I think the repercussions of removing Liz Cheney, we will see the effects of that in the midterm, because key voter blocs will pay attention to exactly how they handled a woman who had the audacity to speak out and speak truth to power about what she saw and what all of us Americans saw on January the 6th, which is President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, inciting a resurrection and causing such chaos in the country that we're still trying to recover from.
Do you think that Donald Trump really wants to run for president again? I mean, just even objectively, I didn't really think he looked like he liked the job. I mean, he didn't look like he was having a grand old time every day. But does he want to do the job again or try to win the job again?
You know, I think it's very difficult to run for president from behind bars, and certainly with his legal issues that he faces, he's in great legal jeopardy, and it'd be very difficult for him to run again. He doesn't like the job. Let's be clear. He'd rather golf than try to legislate or try to control the narrative or even address critical issues such as the economy or the pandemic. So no, he doesn't want the job. He just wants the power and the influence and the bully pulpit. But I don't believe that you'll see Donald Trump running again for president.
Well, I am going to come back to this clip when the time arrives, because I mean, I'm going to wait until it's like not possible to take the exhale. Omarosa Manigault-Newman, do you have time to stay for the next segment? Because we're going to be talking about the Republican Party and women, and your point about how they exploit women, but they don't actually promote women was a good one. I want to include it in the conversation if you can hold just for 90
Sure,
seconds
Zerlina.
through the break.
I love hanging out with you.
Terrific. So actually, there isn't a break. We're just going to keep going. So stay right there, and I'm going to set up this conversation. Sure. If the Republican Party does purge Congresswoman Liz Cheney for not supporting Donald Trump in his big lie that he won the election, somebody has to replace her. And in a sign that Republicans know it's not the best look to kick out the only woman in their House leadership, the apparent favorite to replace Cheney is Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York. She wants the spot Liz Cheney holds as Republican conference chair. Stefanik became the frontrunner in a party by being an open supporter of the president and his false claims of a stolen election. And no surprise here, men are complaining about both of them. Republicans want Cheney out because she's been speaking her mind, which is, of course, very unladylike. But reportedly, lawmakers are not thrilled with Stefanik. And as Congressman Mike Johnson called it, her quote-unquote coronation, which sounds like a beauty pageant reference. Not great. Because how dare a woman go after what she wants without regard for other people? Joining me now is journalist and MSNBC columnist Liz Plank. Also with us, thank you for sticking around, is Omarosa. Liz, so while some men are complaining about Stefanik, there's also the issue of her being willing to go along with what the powers that be want, i.e. the men who want Donald Trump and the big lie to be the truth when it's not. So don't they realize that the optics of replacing an outspoken woman with a woman who's just a little bit less or more cooperative is like not a good look?
Yeah, this is, it smells like tokenism. It looks like tokenism. I love, and now even the words that you reference, you know, that they're using really sound like tokenism. So yeah, Trump is in charge. And then there are a few men who are, you know, carrying through his vision and his agenda. And women are just kind of, you know, pawns in the game, right? And what's really interesting is that there's actually been a lot more Republican women that have been running than ever before. And actually, there were a lot of women that won their election, right, in 2020. But what's really interesting, though, is that women in the Republican Party are often forced to become much more radical and much more to the right than men have to in the party. So if you look at Kelly Loeffler, right, when she ran, you know, as in her primary, she was, you know, still to the right, but pretty centrist. became a pro-Trump I mean, I don't want to even go into the things that she said. And even Stefanik is actually, used to be, until a few months ago, was actually much more of a centrist, started voting, becoming very pro-Trump, obviously defending him in every possible way. But she actually voted before then less with Trump than Liz Cheney. And so, until recent, it's only when she became very radical and very to the right that she became appealing to the GOP leadership. And so it tells you a lot about sort of this line that women within the Republican Party have to toe, where, all women have to deal with sexism, but it seems like within the Republican Party, it's just like it's just a whole other level.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, Omarosa, that's such a good point. I mean, we talked in the last segment about how Republicans sometimes use women and exploit them being there, and they kind of use them as pawns, moving them around the board as they play their silly game. Mm-hmm. But what is it about the women that are allowing this to happen? And why are they doing that? Like, why is Elise Stefanik stepping forward and saying, yes, I will knife a fellow woman in the House in the back and take her job?
Well, I think it's really a sad state of affairs where you see essentially a cat fight. These women have decided that they're going to go head to head and see where the chips lay. But I will say this, you are absolutely right. Elise was so vocal and opposed to Donald Trump for so very long. And the moment that she changed her tune, then the party leadership embraced her. I will tell you that the folks that want to be in the leadership, they don't really have a lot of choice but to fall in line. And that's why they're trying to push out Representative Liz Cheney, because she is not following this false narrative about what happened on January 6th or about the election being stolen. And so I don't think that any of the women in the party have a choice but to allow themselves to be moved around by the powers that be if there is any desire for them to move up into leadership. They just really have no options.
I have a follow-up question, because I have never worked for Donald Trump or been around sort of his inner sanctum like you have, Omarosa. And I feel like one of the questions I always have is like, are these women speaking up in private, or are they still quiet there? Because, I mean, to the point of Liz Cheney, the problem she has is not that she, has a different opinion or that she's expressing it, is that she's expressing it in the press and making it a story in the press. Is Elise Stefanik quiet with her head down, saying nothing in the meeting, or is she speaking up, at least in that context? I mean, what are the women who are around Trump sort of, trained to do? Do they speak up?
Well, I don't know that what's happening in the party is reflective of everyone in the party, but I can certainly tell you that in private, we know that the Liz Cheney that we see on camera is the Liz Cheney behind the closed doors. I can't say the same thing about Stefanik. I think that she has found a way to strategically advance her career and her ambitions, and that has been following Donald Trump, following his style, and endorsing all of his very dangerous ideas and beliefs.
It's really interesting to watch people shape and change themselves to, align with Donald Trump when he lost the election. I mean, I'm like, guys, fewer votes. Liz, one of the questions that came up around the time of the Women's March is whether or not you can be feminist and be a Republican. There were a lot of anti-choice Republicans who were very upset about not being included in the Women's March, and they're not included in a lot of the feminist movement activities. Mm-hmm. Do you think that you can be a Republican and actually be a feminist?
I've actually been to many conservative conferences. Actually, I went to a women's conservative conference in Texas after the 2016 election to do some reporting to figure out the answer to this question, actually. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting with young conservative women is that they really value freedom of speech and the difference of opinion. That, you believe, they would tell me, as a progressive, you believe that every woman should have the right to abortion. I don't, but I respect you. And that's what this party is all about. That's what being conservative is all about. And what we're watching unfold is really the complete opposite of that. We're seeing a party control the speech of a woman who, by the way, is not being feisty, right? Like, she's not saying, let's give women the right to abortion. Let's create universal daycare. Let's, go for the Green New Deal. It's basic. It's like, let's respect democracy. And she's being shut down. She's being censored. So I don't know how this is playing out for young Republican women who are watching, but based on the things that they've told me in my reporting, I'd be surprised if they agree with what's going on.
Omarosa, it's essentially the same question to you, but I always think about when I first met you, when your book Unhinged was released, and I asked you about the Access Hollywood tape, and you told me that at the time that tape broke in the Washington Post, you were at a Woman for Trump event, like literally wearing the shirt. Do you think, it's a Trump Republican Party now, so can you be a Trump Republican and be a feminist?
Absolutely not, to answer your question. And yes, when Access Hollywood broke, we were actually on a Women for Trump tour with a bus with Donald Trump's face on the side of it. And so just imagine the questions and the looks that we got. But certainly you cannot have this idea that women can be outspoken, that we are in control of our bodies, in control of what happens in our home and in our religious life, and still be in line with today's GOP, because as long as Donald Trump is at the helm, de facto head of the Republican Party, it just is not congruent with what is happening on the face at the party.
I feel like the conservative movement historically is something different, to Omarosa's point, than it is currently. But Liz, do you think as an ideology, there's a contradiction with actually what intersectional feminism is? Because when folks say, well, why can't I be an anti-choice Republican? I go, because I'm a person and I deserve the right to be able to decide what happens with my body. The Supreme Court told me so. Do you see conservatism as contradicting really the principles of intersectional feminism?
Well, yes, on a personal level, but I also think your question is so important, because it actually, again, when we're using the example of what's happening to Liz Cheney, this is Liz Cheney. Like, the GOP is trying to cancel Liz Cheney. They're not trying to cancel, again, a very radical, she's a white woman. She has a lot of authority within the party, a lot of influence, right? She is actually very robust in her status in the party. And so you think about what message this sends to women who maybe don't have all of those checkboxes, right? If the party can be this hostile to someone like Liz Cheney, a woman who is as powerful and privileged, frankly, as Liz Cheney, it does make you wonder, right? How would they act towards a woman that doesn't necessarily have all of those, won that lottery?
That is a very good point. Omarosa, thank you so much for staying a few extra minutes. It was a great conversation. And Liz Plank, thank you again for being here tonight. I'm always into the intersectional feminism conversation. So it's my show. I get to do what I want. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.